Hello and welcome to our second diversity and inclusion chat with Veera Rautio. My name is Emma Koskinen and I'm leading the recruitment and employer branding here in Capgemini, Finland. And Veera for us is a very special person because everyone joining Capgemini goes through Veera's cultural awareness training as part of the onboarding journey. So I'm really happy to have Veera today here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for the chance to connect.
So Veera,
Yeah.
would you like to tell us who you are and what you are doing here today?
Sure, thank you. So I'm Veera Rautio, and I help individuals and teams to get better business results navigating their intercultural diversity. So I help them to understand themselves and understand each other better and be better able to influence outcomes. Sometimes it's negotiations, sometimes it's presentations, sometimes it's leadership or teamwork skills that require a little bit of assistance. So that's my specialty, and I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Thank you, and likewise. And the awareness trainings that you're doing, we have got really good feedback from them. So it's really something our people are really happy about also.
Awesome. And it's always good fun, really great groups and really good questions. So I'm really happy to work with everyone here.
Great. So last time we discussed a little bit about culture. What is culture in this context, diversity and inclusion, what is inclusion, why is it important. But today we're going to go to a little bit to the other side. So what about then when the cultures actually collide?
Yeah.
What happens or what can we actually learn from that? So yeah, let's go then to today's theme. So we know that there are differences and different cultures, they might have a different kind of characteristics and the people work in a different way. So what to do?
Yeah. Well, what to do? It would be so much easier if there was a type of, medicine, some blue pill or some red pill that you could take that would give you the magical properties to be able to always navigate all kinds of conflict. But I think what to do, number one, don't be scared of the fact that things are going to go not necessarily wrong, but they were not going to go exactly the way you planned or wanted them to go. Secondly, that's where most of our learning happens as human beings. I mean, any significant skill that you want to build over time, it doesn't come naturally. It doesn't come, you don't, hit the ball out of the ballpark the first time running, right? You have to practice quite a lot. So I would say what to do is to increase your awareness and really develop your interpersonal influence skills to really understand how human psychology works and how human psychology works in a different cultural context. So it's a long thing to do, and that's why Capgemini offers the types of cultural awareness coachings and trainings and support to, because it's not an easy question to answer, like what to do. It really depends on the circumstance, on the culture, on the team, on, what's at stake. but there's always something that can be done, I would say.
Yeah, so continuing in a little bit about that. So of course, we want to make cultural diversity, or everyone wants to make it as a strength. So what can we actually benefit from the diversity and how we can make it our strength?
Yeah, I think we can make it a strength provided that we are okay with the fact that it's something that we need to consistently get better at and something that we need to consistently become more aware of. And we can only leverage it if we understand it and if we know how to appreciate it and then what to do to be able to really deploy diversity. It's, diversity or cultural differences. I ask this from a lot of my audiences and students, and many times we say, yay, cultural diversity is great. I love it when we're really different, and it gives us, spice to life, and I love travel and all these things. And difference, yes, it's energizing, and it's, there's a lot to learn from it. But we're usually only happy with difference until it comes to our own individual constraints. Like, how happy are you with somebody in your own home, in your own kitchen, who has a very different concept of when to take out the trash, or or what trash to put what into, right? And that's not even a cultural difference yet. Or is it okay to leave the toilet seat up or not? So it's like, when it comes, we're technically okay. In principle, we're really happy with diversity and cultural differences. But then when it comes to our own preferences and our own everyday actions and our own way of doing things as humans, we tend to be, not as easily accepting of, of difference.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit like a relationship, that
Exactly.
first everything is okay and everything is fine, and then when you get to actually live together and you get to know each other, then the little things start actually
Exactly. When the honeymoon is over, and that's why a lot of times in companies and in teams, the way that teams tend to work, there's that forming phase, and everybody's on their best behavior initially, and everybody's really excited about the new thing, and then there's the storming phase where things start to happen, and
maybe the cultures start to collide.
Exactly, they start to collide, and then it's a question of how do we navigate from there to the actual performing phase, when we actually manage to make the different strengths that we have, different perspectives that we have, different experiences, and different perhaps even just ways of looking at how to express this to our client, or how to understand the requirements of the client. And what is actually an explicitly stated requirement, and what is a requirement that client did not expressly state, but it's still there, and we should have been able to pick up on it. And that's when things start to get interesting.
Yeah, but how can we work around it? I mean, of course, making our culture more inclusive, understanding the differences, but is there something that you would like to take up about it, like how to really make the culture more inclusive and how to tackle this?
I would say it's not something that we can really work around. It's something we need to work through. It's something that we need to, a lot of teams these days, we work virtually, and in your organization it's not a new thing, but in a lot of other organizations it's quite a recent thing that we've started to work in virtual teams, and we've started to work from home, and technology has enabled different ways to stay connected for our teams. So that, I find, also brings a whole new level of potential for collision and potential for misunderstanding, because so much of interpersonal communication comes from our nonverbals and our tone of voice and all of these things. And so what happens if we don't even have our cameras on? What happens if we're only on God forbid, email, or chat is perhaps even better, but there's just certain things that don't come across correctly on on an emoji. So or even without the emoji.
Especially without the emoji. That's a very interesting topic, and we are going to talk a lot more about it in our third episode. But then I was also thinking that many companies are now recruiting from abroad, or they might have some landed people or expats working for them. What to consider when you have expats in your team?
Oh, good one. obviously, those people who have the expatriate experience means they've actually had to leave their home, they've had to leave their everyday, their social network, their families have often uprooted and left their schools and left their friends and then come to a completely different country and different culture. And then, especially with us working virtually over distances, I would say if you've got someone in your team who has expatriated, especially recently within the last couple of years, I would say, be extra mindful of them because they may not have the same bandwidth. You're going home or you're continuing your everyday life experience after your work commitments are over and you're going to the comfort of your existing social network, your hobbies, you know how to use the systems in that country, you know how to travel, you know how to, sort out the right laundry detergent in the supermarket. And maybe you've been in the company for a longer time, you know who to ask, who's your go-to person for all of these types of everyday things. Should I call this guy on Tuesday or should I call him next Tuesday? Is he, what day of the week is okay to do what thing? And your expat colleague has to learn all of these things, plus they have to do their job. And they also often have a spouse, they also often have kids, so they're managing a lot of non-work related change in their everyday life, and they may not be sleeping quite as relaxed as you. Maybe you're not either, but but they're kind of carrying an extra load, I would say.
Yeah, that's really, really good to remember, and I'm really happy to see that also there are a lot more about this kind of spouse programs all the time in Finland and different kind of activities for expats. So that's something great. Yeah.
Because we've got different types of cultures. In some cultures, it's a really community-oriented thing, and there's a lot of connections that people spend a lot of time with their family, or there's like a large, broad social network that you're connected with all the time. And sometimes even your work colleagues become sort of like an extended family. After work, you will maybe go down to the pub and have a couple drinks with your work colleagues. And then there's some cultures which are really sort of more individualistic, where you go to work, you get your stuff done, and then you clock out, and then you go and live your own life, but you don't necessarily connect so much socially beyond working hours. And so what to do to navigate this, and I think it's something that we need to, especially in these times of lack of connection, humans have that need for connection and for feeling like they belong and feeling like they are appreciated and part of something meaningful. How do we navigate that in these different teams or different, I think that's something that's important to consider if you've got expats.
Yeah, so just remember that hiring from abroad is just not to bring a person here and start working for you, but you should consider other aspects.
There's a lot going on, and I think you definitely should. I encourage all organizations, regardless of their resources and size, I do encourage hiring people from a different background and hiring people who look different and who eat different types of food and listen to different types of music, because there's wealth in that diversity. And yes, sometimes in your team it might be difficult to, or it might be a challenge to get things through with somebody who doesn't seem like they're reading your mind. But remember, if that person, if you're not being understood by somebody, it means that is representative of a large amount of potential clients, for example. So it's better to sort that stuff out within your team so that you can then leverage it in the world of business than, take the easy road and only hang out with the like-minded folks and then leave a whole bunch of opportunities unleveraged.
What about then if we have a conflict or we can say conflict. If we have a conflict, what can we learn about it, or
Mhm.
how to make it a good thing, because it doesn't have to be exactly a bad thing.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And in fact, cultures differ in their approach to conflict as well. There are some cultures where you're actually a credible authority or an expert if you are really kind of forceful in expressing your opinion, and where the culture, where it's culturally okay to not shy away from conflict, but to actually like sort of not physically fight it out, but to really forcefully kind of argue your point and be of a different opinion. And then there's the other side, and there's those sort of more conflict averse cultures where it's a sign of civilization, it's a sign of being an expert and being, you know, a person in a senior position, that you would never use a lot of authority and use a lot of force in your interpersonal encounters, but you would navigate the conflict in indirect ways. You would express your difference of opinion without directly saying no. If you can follow what I'm saying, that's a lot more subtle.
Yes. That can really set up interesting situations.
Yeah.
Everyone has a very different way to handle the conflict.
Yeah.
Someone wants to really avoid it, and the other one just wants to say things very clearly and get to the point. Yeah, I think we can, everyone working in an international company can recognize this kind of situations. But just out of curiosity, in Finland, where are we in that? Do we like conflicts, or are we trying to avoid them, or?
What would you think?
That's a very difficult question, because I think we tend to have the image that we are quite direct, but then at the same time, I'm not so sure if we are.
Yeah.
That are we really able to handle feedback, or do we take it really into each other's? Because I know that I kind of appreciate direct talk, but then also I take feedback really seriously. So there's a kind of a conflict there.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you said that, because that's also what the research finds. And my 25 years of empirical research in different teams and organizations. In many ways, yes, we are quite direct in Finland. However, they say that Finland is the Japan of the North, which means that we are, and there's, of course, this is where we come back to personality that we mentioned last time. This is really a question of what your own personal preferences are. But in general, within the Finnish culture, we tend to shy away from being very direct or directly critical. We are more sort of Asian in that sense, and it does have to do with feedback.
That's very interesting, because I think we tend to maybe think that we are very tough in this sense, but then I do.
Yeah, we appreciate openness.
Yeah.
And we appreciate honesty, almost to a sort of naive level, I would say. You know, we go to negotiations to kind of lay the cards on the table, and we say things, you know, we say what we mean, and we mean what we say, and this is what in a Finnish culture is considered, you know, a valued, sort of appreciated thing. And in many other cultures, that is not necessarily the value. They think it's a little bit childish to say your intended outcomes right away. It's like, and it causes this kind of distrust. Like, how can someone be so open with their agenda? There must be something under the table going on here, because you would never approach something quite as openly and directly. And actually, something that many times does surprise people who, you know, expatriates who come and live and work in Finland, especially in an expertise position, they often ask me, like, what is this whole thing? Like, you tell the authorities the kinds of mistakes that you've made in your, you know, the close call situations you've had, like, whoa. In Finland, if you don't openly express those things, that's when you'll get in trouble with the authorities. And in many other cultures, it's the exact opposite. You do not tell whatever mistakes you've made. You do not openly show them to the legislating authority. But you try and cover it up and you make it look really nice and then kind of hope it goes away. And then you sort it out in-house, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, it answered. Thank you. That's interesting. Great. Okay. Maybe as a last question for today's session, what kind of tips you would give to an organization who is at the beginning of their diversity and inclusion journey? For example, someone who is having a fusion, different companies fusing together, or maybe expanding abroad. Finnish company who is getting international, which is now a trend also.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, what are your tips?
My number one tip would be to recognize that it is a thing. Culture is a thing. A lot of mergers and acquisitions end up not achieving the intended outcome within the next 3 years to 5 years, specifically because in all the busyness of the due diligence and the isness of the business, we tend to forget that people are neuropsychologically wired beings who have an inbuilt resistance to all kinds of change, and they tend to follow, cultures change, but they don't change instantly. So my tip would be to be aware and budget into your, whatever it is you're looking to do, budget time and budget adequate resources to allow your people to really learn how to work together better, because it doesn't happen magically by itself. And it's something that you can lead business by Excel document, you can lead business by sort of numerical outcomes, but it is very difficult to lead across cultures. Purely from outcomes, KPIs, numerical targets, and Excel documents. In my experience, it just don't work.
So yeah, true that, and very good advice. Great. But hey, I think we are getting to the end of the second episode of our diversity and inclusion talk. So maybe a little bit about the next episode. We have already discussed a little bit about virtual teams, how to lead virtual teams, or what might be actually the difficulties in virtual teams. And in the next episode, we will go deeper in that theme. So we will actually discuss about leading a diverse, culturally diverse virtual team.
Yeah.
So that will be interesting.
Hop into the leadership piece.
Yes. Okay. But I think I can say from both of us that we would like to thank you for joining us today, and we will be then talking in the next episode more.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks.